Princess of stood at the edge of the grand throne hall, her hands folded tightly behind her back, the way royal etiquette demanded. The hall glowed with soft blue light, shimmering over the polished crystal floors. Every pillar reflected 1,000 tiny sparks, as if the palace walls were made of frozen stars. Yet despite the beauty, felt as if she were standing inside a cold cage. Today was supposed to be a celebration, the signing of peace between the Empire and the human alliance. Yet everyone in the room knew the mood was not truly peaceful. The nobles whispered behind raised palms, their eyes sharp like glass. Could sense their emotions faintly, not full telepathy like the others of her race, only a gentle ripple. But even that small sense told her everything. They viewed her as a flaw in a perfect painting. She had been born with dull telepathic abilities. They called her the silent stem, a flower that never bloomed. Among the telepathy was not just a skill, it was identity, status, pride. Lacking it was treated like a soft shadow that wandered behind the golden glow of the royal family. Whenever she walked through the palace corridors, servants bowed out of duty, not respect. On this day, she wished she could disappear into those shadows completely. At the center of the hall stood Captain Elias Ward, the human representative. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the relaxed confidence of someone who had survived storms and learned to breathe through them. His uniform was simple compared to the elaborate silks worn by nobles, yet he held himself like someone who didn't need jewels to prove worth. When the negotiations ended, the nobles stepped forward with an announcement. Already sensed trouble from the sharp flick in their emotional aura. The High Minister smiled widely, too widely. As a gesture of unity, he declared, we offer Princess to the Human Alliance as a symbolic companion to their honorable captain. A hush filled the hall. Then, like distant thunder, whispers erupted everywhere. His breath caught. She felt heat rise to her cheeks, not from embarrassment but from the sudden, sinking realization. This was not an honor. This was humiliation disguised as diplomacy. Offering her, the defective princess, to a telepathy-less species was the nobles' private joke. They expected humans to be perplexed. They expected the galaxy to laugh. Her mother, the Empress, remained silent, her eyes unreadable. Silence was permission. Lowered her gaze slightly. She had no right to refuse. Royals were expected to obey like carefully trained birds. But Captain Elias did something no expected. He didn't laugh. His brows furrowed, and he looked around as if he were trying to understand a puzzle that felt wrong. Then his eyes truly met them, and something in his expression softened. He stepped forward politely but firmly. If the princess herself wishes this, he said, then I will accept, but only if it is her choice. The hall froze. Nobles were not used to being challenged, especially by a human. Felt her heart tremble. No one had ever asked if she wanted anything. Her voice felt buried under years of silence, but she searched for it slowly. She hesitated, her voice soft but steady. I will go. It was not desire. It was escape, a step away from the suffocating golden cage. But Elias didn't smile triumphantly. Instead, his eyes held quiet sympathy. The kind one offers someone hurt, not someone gifted. As the hall dismissed, walked beside him through shimmering corridors. She expected coldness, indifference, or curiosity. Instead, he kept a respectful distance, giving her space to breathe. At the exit, before boarding the human transport shuttle, she finally spoke. I am sorry, she whispered, her fingers curling around the edge of her cloak. You were forced into this. Elias shook his head gently. No, but it feels like you were. She looked up at him, surprised by the simple kindness in his tone. He wasn't looking at her silver skin or her elaborate robes. He was looking at her, the person behind the title. For what it's worth, he added, no one will force you on my ship. Something warm flickered inside her chest. Not joy, just a fragile sense of safety she had never felt before. Stepped aboard the human craft with quiet breaths, a mixture of fear and hope swirling inside her. The nobles had meant this as a joke, but felt the first hint that her life was about to change, in ways they had never imagined. The Horizon Ember, the human starship carrying away from her empire, hummed gently as it moved through quiet space. Its lights were warm yellow instead of the cold blue she grew up with. Its walls felt alive with soft vibrations, and its floors had a slight warmth that reminded her of walking in sunlight. Stepped into the main corridor slowly, her silver robes brushing lightly against the metal. For the first time in her life, she wasn't followed by guards. She wasn't watched by tutors. No one whispered behind her back. The ship felt strangely peaceful, like a home whose doors had been left open for anyone to enter without fear. Elias walked beside her, guiding her carefully but without pressure. He didn't reach for her arm or walk too close. He simply made sure she didn't feel lost. "This ship is yours as much as ours," he said gently. "You can explore anywhere except the engine core. That place has a habit of burning people." Nodded. She didn't smile yet. Smiling still felt like a fragile luxury. But she felt the corners of her heart loosen a bit. The first they met was the engineer. She had grease on her cheeks and a wild grin, her red hair tied in a messy bun. "Welcome aboard, Princess," said with a bright laugh. "Hope you don't mind things being a little less shiny than your palace." Blinked. No one had ever spoken to her with such casual warmth. "It is refreshing," she whispered. Eyed her delicate silver gloves. "If you ever want to learn how our coils work, I'd be happy to show you. It's messy but fun." Didn't understand the word fun fully, but something in her chest warmed at the offer. "Maybe later," she said softly. They moved next to the ship's kitchen, where the cook kneaded dough on a metal table. His sleeves were rolled up and flour dusted his beard. He looked up with a friendly smile. "You hungry, Princess?" "I do not know," she admitted. Laughed warmly. "That's all right. We'll figure it out. Humans eat for comfort too, not just survival." Watched his hands press and fold the dough. The movement was gentle, patient. It reminded her of the way the palace caretakers brushed her hair when she was a child, back when people still believed she might grow into something special. When they reached the medical bay, Dr. Lyra bowed her head politely. She wasn't stiff like healers. Instead, her bow felt respectful, acknowledging rather than her title. "I have something for you," Lyra said. She opened a drawer and pulled out a pair of soft fabric gloves. "Your skin is sensitive, right? These will protect you from metal surfaces." Hesitated before accepting them. The gesture felt personal. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. As the hours passed, she explored more of the ship. She found a small observation window near the back, where she could see swirling clouds of starlight like drifting paint. She stayed there for a long time, breathing quietly. For the first time, she didn't fear being observed. For the first time, she didn't feel like a fragile trophy. That evening, Elias found her sitting on a bench near the window, the reflected in her silver skin, making her look like she had been carved from the sky itself. "Do you like it here?" he asked softly. Took her time before answering. "It is peaceful, different, lighter, as if the air itself is kinder." Elias sat beside her but kept his distance. "Peace is something everyone deserves." She turned her head slightly. No noble had ever spoken about deserving peace. Peace was a privilege, not a right, but Elias said it as if it were natural. "What are humans like?" she asked. He chuckled softly. "A mix of stubborn, loud, and hopeful. We make mistakes but try again. We protect the people who matter to us, even when we're scared." Listened to his voice and felt something warm settle in her chest. "When I was in the palace," she said quietly, "I often wondered if a life could feel different, if there was a place where I could breathe without fear." Elias looked at her gently. "Then maybe this ship can be that place." A silence followed, soft, not heavy. She watched a comet streak across the darkness, its tail glowing like a silver ribbon. "Thank you," she whispered, not sure if he understood how much she meant it. He gave her a small smile. "We take care of our own." She lowered her gaze, the words echoing through her heart. Our own. No one had ever included her in such a phrase. That night, as she walked to her assigned quarters, she realized something quietly powerful. Even if she didn't understand freedom completely, she was finally learning its shape. Weeks passed aboard the Horizon Ember and began to feel life in a way she had never known. The warmth of the ship, the laughter of the crew, and the quiet strength of Elias became a rhythm she could trust. For the first time, she felt she could exist without fear of judgment. But just as a flower can grow only to be tested by a sudden frost, her fragile peace faced its first storm. A signal came from deep space, urgent and sharp. The screen in the bridge lit up with the emblem of the Empire, glowing like frozen fire. A high envoy appeared, his tall frame perfectly rigid, his expression carved from ice. "Princess," he said, his voice cold and even, "return to immediately. Your presence is required. This is a matter of honor and royal duty." The crew exchanged nervous glances. Elias stepped forward, his hand resting lightly on the console. "Is not property," he said. "She will choose for herself." The envoy's eyes narrowed. "You misunderstand. To us, she is an asset, a symbol. She cannot make such decisions alone." His heart raced. She had left the palace to escape this, to live freely, and now it had followed her into space. Her stomach tightened, and a chill ran along her spine. Fear whispered that she could still be dragged back, that the doors of her new life could slam shut before she had even learned to stand fully. Yet for the first time she felt something new, the sharp taste of resolve. She looked at Elias, who met her gaze steadily, silently telling her she had the right to stand. She inhaled slowly, letting the rhythm of the ship steady her heartbeat. "I stay," she said, her voice small but firm. "Not because you let me, but because I choose to. I claimed my life the moment I stepped aboard this ship. I am not your possession." The envoy stiffened, his jaw tightening. "This is insubordination. The consequences will reach far beyond your understanding." "I understand perfectly," replied. Her voice grew steadier as she spoke. "I have learned what it means to live freely. I will not abandon it, not for fear, not for threats, and not for the pride of an empire that never saw me as a person." Elias placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. "You are not alone," he whispered. The envoy's hologram flickered, his anger palpable. "You will regret this, princess." Stood taller than she thought she could. She could feel the old chains of expectation trying to wrap around her again, but she pushed them back with the warmth she had discovered aboard the ship. The laughter of the crew, the quiet respect Elias showed her, the small acts of kindness that made her heart ache with their simplicity. After the transmission ended, silence fell on the bridge, sank onto a bench, trembling slightly, exhaustion pressing down on her shoulders. Elias knelt beside her, brushing a strand of silver hair from her face. "You protected my choice," she whispered, a tear slipping down her cheek. "You didn't fight for me like I was a gift. You fought because I deserved to stand." Elias smiled faintly, though worry lingered in his eyes. "You protected yourself. I only stood beside you." She looked around the bridge, at the crew who had watched in silent support. The warmth of their quiet loyalty filled her chest like sunlight flooding a dark room. She realized that protection wasn't just about weapons or shields. It was about trust, courage, and letting someone fight with you, not for you. Later, in the quiet of her quarters, sat by the observation window and stared at the endless stars. She traced constellations with her finger, each one a story, a choice, a life she could shape. She thought of the palace she had left behind, the nobles who had mocked her, the whispers of failure that once haunted her every step. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel something stronger than fear, pride. Pride in the decision to claim her own path. Pride in standing, despite trembling knees, in a universe that seemed too large and too indifferent. She whispered to the stars softly, almost like a prayer, I am not yours, I am mine. And in that moment she understood something profound. Freedom was not given, it was claimed. And she had claimed it not with power, not with telepathy, not with privilege, but with the quiet strength of a heart that refused to bend. Elias watched from the doorway, giving her space, letting her be the princess she truly was, no longer silent, no longer a stem hiding in shadows, but a living, breathing force ready to face the galaxy on her own terms. For the first time, knew that she could belong not because of title or duty, but because of choice. Days passed on the horizon ember, and the routine of ship life became a gentle rhythm that slowly learned to embrace. The once overwhelming emptiness of space now felt like a cradle, rocking her softly with every hum of the ship. She no longer measured herself by the cold standards of nobles, nor did she shrink from conversation or the laughter of the human crew. Elias noticed the change. She walked taller, spoke with more certainty, and her silver eyes, once full of quiet doubt, now held something softer, curiosity, wonder, and a glimmer of joy. One afternoon, the engineer invited to the engine room. The humming coils sent gentle vibrations through the floor, a sensation foreign yet comforting to her. Guided her hands over the energy conduits, letting her feel the heat without fear. It's alive in its own way, said, smiling. You have to listen, not control, that's the secret. Nodded slowly, feeling the subtle pulse of energy, and realized she had never truly touched life like this. Every step she took, every coil she pressed was her choice. She wasn't being tested, graded, or mocked. She was learning, exploring, breathing in freedom like air. Later in the small kitchen, shared bread dough with her. Her fingers brushed against the sticky mass and flour dusted her robes. She laughed quietly at the mess she made, surprised at the warmth that rose in her chest. The crew joined in, teasing gently but without malice. She realized she could laugh freely here, unafraid of judgment. As evening fell, she returned to the observation deck, watching nebulae swirl like ribbons of color across the darkness. Elias joined her quietly, sitting beside her on the bench. Neither spoke for a while, just letting the stars reflect in their eyes. Do you ever wonder what it would have been like if your life had been different? She asked, her voice soft. All the time, he admitted. But I've learned that it's better to focus on the life you can shape than the one you've lost. Tilted her head, the soft lines of her face bathed in starlight. I never imagined anyone would speak like that to me. In my world, words were used to control, to remind you of your weakness. You're not weak, Elia said gently. You just needed a place where your strength could grow. Her chest tightened, a new feeling stirring, something between hope and fear. She realized she had begun to trust him, not blindly, but in a way that felt like choosing warmth over cold. For the first time, she understood what it meant to belong somewhere, not because of duty, title, or expectation, but simply because someone saw her as herself. In the following days, found herself noticing small things she had never appreciated before. The quiet acts of care, the medic checking her gloves, the cook saving a piece of bread for her, the engineer showing her a new device, wove into a tapestry of trust. And each evening, Elias would sit beside her, speaking softly about stars, planets, or stories from Earth. One night, as the ship drifted near a violet nebula, allowed herself to speak freely for the first time. I used to believe that life was written for me, that I was nothing more than a mistake in a perfect design. But now, her voice trailed, unsure, but her eyes glimmered. Now I feel like I can write new pages, with you. Elia's hand brushed lightly against hers, careful but deliberate. We'll write them together, he said, his voice steady, and no one else gets to hold the pen. Her lips curved into a tentative smile, the first one that felt entirely her own. She realized that strength didn't always come from bending others' wills or achieving power. Sometimes it came from choosing courage in the quiet moments, from trusting herself and trusting the people who chose to stand beside her. That night, lying in her quarters, closed her eyes and felt the rhythm of the ship beneath her. It was alive, but so was she, alive in a way she had never been before. Her pulse was not dictated by fear, obligation, or expectation. It beat boldly, quietly, and steadily. And somewhere deep inside, she knew that this was only the beginning. The galaxy had tried to make her a prize. The court had expected her to bow, to be embarrassed, to be small. But here, among humans who saw her as a person, and with Elias who treated her with respect, she discovered something more powerful than any telepathy or royal command. She discovered freedom. She discovered choice. She discovered that her heart, once silent, could beat boldly, and that perhaps one day it could even choose love. The horizon ember glided through the star-strewn void, peaceful and silent, or so it seemed. Stood near the observation window, tracing the glow of distant nebulae with her fingers. The soft hum of the ship beneath her feet felt comforting, familiar, almost like a heartbeat she could trust. Then the alarms blared. Red lights flashed along the walls. The ship shuddered violently, throwing forward. She grabbed the railing, her silver robes fluttering with the sudden motion. "Status report," Elias shouted, his voice steady despite the shaking deck. The communications officer turned pale. "Dreadnought massive, unannounced. They're hailing us." A hologram flickered on the main screen. A commander appeared, tall and imposing, his eyes sharp and unforgiving. "Return the princess, Captain Ward. Failure to comply will result in destruction." His chest tightened. Her stomach lurched with fear she hadn't felt since the palace. She could feel the weight of their power, the crushing expectations, the silent threat of punishment. This was the empire she had fled, the empire that wanted to remind her she was nothing. Elias moved to stand beside her. "Stay close," he said, keeping his hand lightly on her back. "We'll get through this." The crew scrambled to their stations. Sparks flew and monitors flickered under the stress of sudden attacks. Felt her heart hammering in her chest. She wanted to shrink, to disappear, to return to the cocoon of safety she had found. But the fear didn't drive her to run. Something stronger rose in its place: resolve. As the tried to breach the ship's shields felt a strange, sharp pulse in her mind. She froze, recognizing it instantly, the telepathic push of the attempting to reach her thoughts, to dominate her. Pain stabbed through her skull like shards of ice. Elias called, grabbing her hands and holding her firmly as sparks rained around them. "Focus on me. You're safe here." She closed her eyes and drew in a trembling breath. For a long moment she thought she would collapse under the invisible weight. But then she remembered the crew's kindness, its laughter, its warmth, Lyra's care, and Elias' quiet strength. Each memory was a thread, weaving a shield she could cling to. "No," she thought, "they do not control me. I choose my life." Slowly she reached into herself and pushed back, not with power but with will. Every thought of fear, every memory of obedience, she replaced with moments she had claimed for herself. The soft hum of the ship, the freedom to explore, the touch of Elia's steady hand. The telepathic invasion faltered. Pain eased. The pulse of the command broke apart, failing against the sheer determination of someone who would no longer be treated like an object. Opened her eyes. She was shaking, exhausted, but she was still standing. Elias pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, shielding her from the remnants of sparks and alarm lights. "You did it," he whispered, his voice trembling with relief. "You didn't just survive, you fought back." She leaned into him, allowing herself to rest against his chest. Tears slipped down her cheeks, not from weakness, but from relief, from the sheer, raw beauty of being seen and protected in a universe that had never cared before. I am done running," she whispered, her voice firmer than it had ever been. "I will not hide from them, from fear, from myself." Elias stroked her hair gently. "Then we face this together." The crew, emboldened by his courage, worked with renewed determination. Shields stabilized, weapons engaged in careful defense, and slowly the horizon ember regained its composure. The dreadnought hovered, hesitant, unsure of how to break through the resolve of a princess who had learned to claim her own life. Later, when the alarm ceased and the ship's gentle hum returned, stood at the observation deck again, watching the stars drift silently. Fear had come, uninvited, and tried to drag her back to shadows. But she had met it head-on, with courage she hadn't known she possessed. Elias approached quietly, offering her a small, tired smile. "You are stronger than you know," he said softly. She looked at him, her own heart pounding with a mix of exhaustion and pride. "No, we are stronger," she corrected, remembering the crew, remembering the warmth, remembering the choice she had made to stand and fight. That night allowed herself to finally believe that freedom could survive, even against the might of an empire. And for the first time, she understood that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to stand anyway, even when fear knocked at the door with all the weight of the galaxy behind it. And in that quiet, trembling victory, a small spark of something new ignited in her chest, a feeling that perhaps one day it could grow into love, hope, and a family she chose to build, not one she was forced into. The horizon ember drifted quietly through a field of violet nebulae, the glowing clouds of gas reflecting in silver eyes. Her heart still raced from the confrontation with the dreadnought, but exhaustion had been replaced by something stronger, clarity. She knew what she had to do. Fear could no longer dictate her choices. Elias entered the observation deck, carrying 2 cups of warm tea. He handed one to her, and she accepted it with a small smile. The warmth spread through her fingers, grounding her in the present. "They're still out there," Elias said quietly, nodding toward the dark expanse of space. "The will not forget this." Nodded, her mind already turning. "They can chase me," she said softly, "but they cannot take my choice from me." Elias studied her carefully. "What are you thinking?" "I am thinking," she replied, "that it is time to stop reacting. It is time to act. If they want a battle of fear, I will show them that I no longer belong to their rules. I will use their own laws against them." Elias raised an eyebrow. "And how do you plan to do that?" Straightened, a confidence settling into her posture that was foreign yet familiar. "The Galactic Council. If I petition them, invoke my right to asylum, then any attack on this ship is an attack on me officially. No can ignore that. Their empire has power, but they cannot bend the law to claim me as a tool." Elias smiled, admiration softening his features. "You are brilliant." The next hours were a whirlwind. Learn to operate the ship's communication console with guidance from the crew. Her voice, clear and steady, broadcast across vast distances. "This is Princess of the Empire. I claim asylum with the Human Alliance. Any attack on this vessel is an attack on me personally, and I will present my case before the Galactic Council. I choose to live freely. I choose to remain with the crew of the Horizon Ember." Silence followed her words, filled with a sense of absolute power. Her voice carried the weight of someone who had lived under oppression and had finally found a voice that could not be ignored. The dreadnought's response was delayed. Confusion rippled across the ship's bridge. Their commanders had expected fear, obedience, hesitation. Instead, the princess had seized control. Their attack faltered, engines humming uncertainly, shields held, but doubt lingered in their minds. Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've just outmaneuvered an entire empire." Looked at him, a small, tired smile brushing her lips. "No," she said softly. "We've outmaneuvered them. The crew, you, everyone, you stood with me. I could not have done this alone." The crew cheered quietly, relief and admiration shining in their eyes. Clapped her hands, nodded proudly, and Lyra's smile was soft but full of respect. Returned to the observation deck, gazing at the nebulae stretching across the endless dark. Stars shimmered like scattered diamonds, and she felt a strange, wonderful sense of ownership over her own life for the first time. The universe had seemed so vast, so intimidating, yet suddenly it felt like a place where she could exist, where she could make choices that truly mattered. Elias joined her again, his voice gentle. You're incredible, you faced them and you did not flinch. She leaned slightly against him, drawing comfort from his presence. I did not just face them, I chose, and choosing feels different than surviving. It feels alive. He nodded, smiling softly. It's more than alive, it's freedom. Closed her eyes, feeling the vibrations of the ship beneath her, feeling the warmth of the tea still in her hands, feeling Elia's beside her. She realized she was smiling fully now, not the tentative curve of lips from earlier days, but a smile that came from the depths of her heart. Elias, she said softly, almost afraid to speak it aloud, I want to stay. Not because I have to or because they want me to, but because I choose to. I want to stay with you, with all of you. He turned to her, eyes shining with quiet awe and affection. Then stay. We will build the life you choose together. And in that moment, felt a surge of emotion unlike anything she had known. The fear, the doubts, the years of being treated as less than herself, they melted away in the presence of choice, loyalty, and trust. She felt lighter, freer, and more alive than she had ever felt in the golden halls of her empire. They could threaten, they could loom in the darkness of space, but they could not touch her courage, her freedom, or the life she had claimed for herself. As the horizon ember sailed forward into the stars, understood something simple and beautiful. She was no longer a prize, no longer a symbol, no longer a tool of politics. She was a person. She was a princess, yes, but more importantly, she was the author of her own story. And for the first time, she imagined a future she could choose, not one written by an empire, but one shaped by hope, courage, and the people she loved. Months had passed since the horizon ember had faced the dreadnought. The stars no longer seemed cold or threatening they glimmered like friends, distant yet welcoming. She had grown stronger, braver, and more certain of herself with every day aboard the ship. The crew had become her family, the people she had chosen to trust, to laugh with, and to share small victories. Elias stood beside her on the observation deck, the same spot where she had first felt the thrill of freedom. He held a small, carved wooden charm in his hands, a simple token, but heavy with meaning. It was a human symbol of chosen family, of trust and protection. I made this for you, he said quietly, offering it. Took it in her hands, feeling the warmth of the wood, the weight of intention. She studied it carefully, tracing the delicate lines with her fingers. A gentle smile spread across her face. Why does this feel heavier than it is? She asked softly. Because it carries more than wood, Elias replied. It carries choice. It carries trust. It carries all the moments we've shared and all the moments we will share. She looked up at him, her silver eyes reflecting the distant nebulae outside. She had once thought that love was a game of duty or obligation. She had been raised to believe that feelings were secondary to expectation. But now she understood love could be chosen. It could be built, nurtured, and protected. It was not something imposed. It was something earned together. I want to stay with you, she whispered, her voice firm and tender. Not because of duty, not because I'm expected to, but because I choose to. I want to build a life with you, a family with you. Elia's eyes softened, a mixture of relief, awe, and joy shining in their depths. Then stay, he said gently. We'll build it together however it looks. No one else gets to decide who we are. Let herself lean into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek. In that moment, she realized she was no longer the fragile, overlooked princess she had once been. She was a person who had claimed her freedom, faced fear, and chosen love. The crew watched quietly from nearby, smiling, clapped softly, nodded proudly, and Lyra's eyes glimmered with respect. They had seen her grow from someone who doubted her worth into a woman who could face an entire empire with courage, and now she was choosing a life filled with hope. Later, as the ship sailed toward a distant star system, and Elias wandered through the small garden they had cultivated aboard the ship. Tiny plants, grown from seeds had salvaged from human colonies, flourished in hydroponic trays. Touched a green leaf gently, marveling at how life could grow anywhere if nurtured. "Do you think we can really build something here?" she asked softly, almost afraid of hope. Elias took her hand, intertwining fingers carefully. "We already are," he said. "A family isn't just born, it's made day by day with love and choice." She leaned against him, watching the stars drift by outside the viewport. The galaxy that had once sought to control her, to make her a joke, now felt like a canvas she could paint herself. With Elias, with the crew, with the freedom she had claimed, she could choose joy, laughter, courage, and even love. Felt a warmth bloom in her chest, a slow and steady fire that had nothing to do with duty or expectation. It was the warmth of belonging, of being chosen, of choosing herself and the people she loved. "Do you think they will ever understand?" she asked quietly, thinking of the court, the empire that had tried to shape her into something she was not. Elias smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "They don't need to, we know, and that's enough." Smiled back, her heart full. She had been given away as a joke, treated as a prize, and yet she had rewritten the story. She had built a life of choice, courage, and love. She had found a home where no one forced her to bow, where she could laugh freely, and where she could love without fear. And as the horizon ember sailed on through the endless sea of stars, knew this truth more deeply than anything else. The galaxy's cruelty had failed spectacularly. They had expected humiliation. They had expected her to bow. But she had chosen. She had stood. She had loved. And together with Elias, she would build a family stronger than any empire's pride, one made not of titles or bloodlines, but of trust, courage, and the freedom to choose. For the first time in her life was not a princess controlled by others. She was the author of her own story, the keeper of her own heart, and the mother of a family she would create, piece by piece, with love. And that was a victory no empire could ever take away.